With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halverson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. Coming up later, nearly $2 million is available to support sustainable pest management. We'll have the details on that. But our top story today, Administrator of USDA's Economic Research Service, Spiro Stefano, says despite a forecast calling for lower farm incomes this year, the financial health of the farm sector is still strong.
In terms of the balance sheet for the ag sector, overall, equities increasing about 2.7%. This is driven by farmland values, building values, and those farmland and buildings account for about 80% of farm assets. Debt has also increased, but at a slower rate, at about 1.6%. So on balance, we see the debt to equity ratio falling, which is an improvement, and so is the debt to asset ratio. That's falling.
But prices that farmers are getting for many of their crops continue to fall. And in fact, USDA is predicting a 12% drop in crop receipts. But he points out that it's offset a little by a 1% drop in production expenses.
The production expenses have been revised downward for several inputs. Feed and fertilizer, pesticide expenses were all revised downward, as well as fuels and oils.
He also says direct government payments to farmers will be lower in 2024 than they were last year. House Committee on Agriculture Chairman Glenn G.T. Thompson, a Republican from Pennsylvania, has a different take. Thompson says USDA's September update to the Farm Financial Outlook continues to present a bleak picture. He says, quote, declining commodity prices, record farm production costs driven by the reckless spending of the Biden-Harris administration, the largest agricultural trade deficit on record, and an outdated farm safety net threaten to wipe out family farms across the country, end quote. Thompson says the numbers are more than just data points on spreadsheets, and they tell the story of struggling American farmers desperate for relief, certainty, and stability. He points the issue back to the Farm Bill and says it's time to put partisan bickering and red lines aside and pass a farm bill. In other news, China is retaliating against Canada's newest import tariffs. Dennis Guy has more.
Following Ottawa's announcement of import tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, steel, and aluminum last week, there was concern that Canadian canola might once again be China's retaliation target. And just 1 week later, it seems those concerns were well-founded. On Tuesday, China said that it plans to launch an anti-dumping investigation into Canadian canola product imports. And China says it also intends to lodge a formal complaint with the World Trade Organization over the issue. A 100% surtax will be levied on all Chinese-made electric vehicles by Canada as of October 1st. Ottawa also announced that it will apply a 25% surtax on Chinese imports of steel and aluminum effective October 15th. Canada is following the lead of the United States and European Union, saying China's intentional state-directed policy of overcapacity and its lack of labor and environmental standards are a threat to Canadian industries and to competing businesses. Canadian Minister for Science and Industry, François-Philippe Champagne, explained the reasons for Chinese product surcharges.
We believe in free trade, but on the other end, you have a country like China. If you're not going to be abiding by the rules of trade, we will have to make sure that we have tariffs in place. So you have to respect the rules. If you don't, overcapacity, you over-subsidize the industry, a number of things that are not in line with trading practices, then obviously you have to react.
More than half of all canola produced in Canada makes its way to China, the world's biggest oilseed importer. Jennifer Dolman, a canola producer in northern Ontario, said that China's latest threat is definitely a concern.
We have many clients all around the world. However, you've got a couple big customers. Thankfully, we've also got the United States, but China is right up there. And China's still going to need canola. They'll just be getting canola from other places.
Between 2019 and 2022, Two of Canada's largest canola exporters were barred from shipping into China. However, as Margaret McQuaig-Johnson of the China-Canada Advisory Forum explains, China did get canola from other places, and in many cases the canola originated in Canada.
As we saw with canola a few years ago when they supposedly banned that, in fact they were getting it through the United Arab Emirates in the form of canola oil. So they found a way of getting it, and they were able to continue with that product.
China says that it intends to launch a World Trade Organization dispute settlement mechanism relating to the Canadian tariff issue, and China has already initiated trade investigations on imports of pork, brandy, and dairy from the European Union in response to tariffs announced there on its electric vehicle imports. Reporting from Canada, I'm Dennis Guy.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halverson. In today's National Spotlight, even a solid fertility plan can lead to nutrient loss for a number of reasons. Chad Smith has more.
For corn and soybean growers, even the best fertility plans can lead to nutrient loss due to weather conditions, nutrient tie-ups, and degraded soils. Zach Martin, Director of Field Sales for Sound Agriculture, says we've learned a lot about nutrient efficiency through this growing season.
The 2024 growing season was certainly yet another season of challenging weather conditions across most of the United States. In parts of the country, we saw extreme excess rains in late spring and early summer that caused a lot of nitrogen loss and negatively affected crop yields, potential, and ecosystems downstream. In other parts of the country, we saw extreme droughts, which certainly keep roots from accessing those key nutrients that lie deeper in the soil. In both instances, that's money down the drain.
He says new nutrient efficiency technologies will be available for growers in 2025.
We're addressing the need for optimized crop production through our innovative science-based solutions. This year, we're launching a product called Blueprint, which is a powerful microbe that pairs well with our key product, Source, and expands the crop's reach beyond the roots. It's like a water and nutrient superhighway. And what we've seen is that using Source plus Blueprint together creates a perfect combination to give crops what they need to succeed. Specifically, Blueprint is our buscular mycorrhizal fungi, also known as AMF, that enables crops to reach into the soil and gain more access to nutrients and water when they're needed most.
Programs are available to help minimize the risk of implementing more sustainable soil health practices.
Sound is launching our own in-house Efficient Acre Incentive, which is a simple, risk-free way for growers to improve efficiency and get paid with an easy-to-use product. This is a first-of-its-kind program designed to help growers optimize their fertility plan. The nuts and bolts of it is that we will pay growers for reducing their use of synthetic nitrogen and synthetic phosphorus up to 25 pounds of each, and that's worth up to $10 per acre of an incentive back to the grower. So it's real money for implementing a practice that will really drive growers toward ROI this year. In turn, all we ask is that they use Source in place of those last 25 units of synthetic N and 25 units of synthetic phosphorus. Ultimately, we recognize that it's challenging for growers to make the decision to cut back on some of their nitrogen and phosphorus, and we're helping remove that risk through our incentive and coupling that with our fertilizer replacement guarantee to make that decision much easier for growers going into 2025.
When growers put their fertility plans together for 2025, Martin talks about his recommendations.
I think ultimately crops need fertilizer to grow, but it's starting from a place of what is the efficient point of fertility on my operation, and what are the tools that I'm using to help me get the most out of that efficient point. And so putting together a fertility plan that really sets them up for a winning season, that drives toward those efficient rates of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and their micronutrients, and involving a product like Source and a product like Blueprint to make sure that they're getting the most out of that fertility that they're putting out there and making use of what Mother Nature is providing to them as well.
To learn more about how Sound Agriculture can help you optimize your nutrient management program, visit sound.ag or talk to your local Sound Agriculture dealer. Chad Smith reporting.
Getting ready for harvest may mean double-checking the combine as well as any operating notes. David Geiger has this report.
With equipment starting to move in the fields and much of the crop ready to harvest in a week or two, preparation work is ongoing. Don Van Halling with Van Wall Equipment says it's time to ask what hasn't been done just yet, recommending farmers look in the operator's manual, then double-check lubrication, chains, hydraulic hoses, and fittings.
As I look at the combines, the thing that I really pay attention to is wear items, and everything from concaves to cylinder bars to feeder house chains to the knives and the choppers. You know, those things need to be 100% to match up with these big crop yields that we're going to be facing.
Van Alling says another important preparation is safety. He stresses farmers make sure all flashing lights, particularly headers, are working. And the number one thing they are on guard against is a major fire.
Make sure that those fire extinguishers are full in an operating mode on the machine. We actually recommend having 2 extinguishers, one in the cab and one out.
Another harvest preparation to make is on the financial side. Angie Setzer with Consus Ag Consulting is a market analyst, but says she likes to remind her producers to check operating notes and talk with their banker about harvest costs, so there's room to cover repairs or unexpected expenses.
Where are we sitting? What are we looking at as we head into harvest? And what do we need to be doing to get you to the end of the year when it comes to making sure that you're making ends meet.
That way farmers can avoid financial stress on top of the stress of harvest. Setzer recommends taking a look at overall financial standing as well as preparing new crop targets.
Where am I sitting and what is it looking like as I head into this coming year? Now that I know, a good portion of my costs and have an overall idea of what I'm going to be looking at from a yield standpoint. And then you can go ahead and make some, changes and adjustments to that as harvest continues and you get a clearer picture of what you're looking at when it comes to overall production.
I'm David Geiger reporting.
That's today's National Spotlight. Now here's John Harris with the Livestock Report.
Exports of U.S. beef posted their second largest month of the year in July, according to the latest data from USDA. U.S. Meat Export Federation President and CEO Dan Hallstrom has the details.
We're very encouraged by what we're seeing with about 110,000 metric tons globally exported. That's up 7%. And the value even more impressive at $910 million, 12% growth. Mexico continues to be very strong. But for the first time in quite a while, we've seen a bit of a spark out of Asia, led by both Taiwan and Japan. So considering the headwinds on exchange rate, in the case of Japan in particular, and to see growth of 14% year on year at 22,000 tons and 17% growth on value at $175 million into Japan, to me this is very encouraging.
Large shipments to Mexico led the way as July pork exports also trended higher.
241,000 tons globally exported on pork. That's 10% growth. As we've been talking for the last year, Mexico continues to be strong. A big month on Mexico, over 100,000 tons and almost $245 million.
The export numbers show some momentum moving into the second half of the year.
I think Latin America, we have every reason to believe that these trend lines on pork, but even on beef as well, Mexico should continue and Central America and South America, I think, are on similar tracks for continued growth. And if you look at the beef side, Latin America has been led by Mexico, has been strong. I think that has a good opportunity to continue. There's a reason to believe that we're finally turning the corner on food service in particular, and I think that's driving some of that July growth on the beef side into Japan. So still we're short, product to some extent in Asia, because of the production side situation. But that being said, the numbers were very encouraging for July, and I think we'll see some continued demand growth the last half of the year for beef as well.
For more, please visit usmef.org. For the U.S. Meat Export Federation, I'm John Harris.
This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halverson. We will be back in just a moment with more of the day's agriculture news. Coming up in a few moments, we'll have today's This Land of Ours report, but first, more of the day's agriculture news. And with a preview of what you'll hear today on AgNet West, here's Brian German.
Fruit, nut, and vegetable harvests are in full swing across California. The USDA reports that late-season peaches, plums, and nectarines are still being picked, though heat-related damage is showing up in some orchards. Prunes are also being harvested and sent for dehydration. Fig and early pomegranate harvests continue, while citrus crops like grapefruit, limes, and Valencia oranges are nearly completed. Kiwi and avocado harvests are ongoing, and berry growers along the coast are still picking raspberries, blackberries, and strawberries. Other crops, including tomatoes, cucumbers, and squash, are being harvested and sold at local markets. Along the Central Coast, crops like green bell peppers, broccoli, and lettuce continue to be picked, though cauliflower has seen some quality issues due to an increase in pests. For nut crops, almond harvest is in full swing, with orchard floors cleaned and trees shaken. Pistachios, pecans, and walnuts are also maturing, with harvest prep underway. The National Cotton Council and the U.S. Department of Agriculture are rolling out a new pilot program called the 4-Bale Module Averaging Pilot Program for the 2024-2025 cotton season. The program lets cotton producers bundle 4 bales together and average their quality data, making it easier to manage and sell cotton. The goal is to improve efficiency in how cotton moves from farms to markets and enhance U.S. cotton's competitiveness. The program is voluntary, and participants can group their bales in multiples of 4 up to 48 bales at a time. Each group will be assigned the same quality data provided they meet specific criteria, such as having the same color grade. If a group doesn't fully meet these standards, only some quality factors will be averaged. For more details or how to participate, farmers can check the USDA website or reach out to their regional cotton classing offices. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is leading a week-long trade mission to Vietnam that kicks off today. Undersecretary Alexis Taylor will head the delegation, which includes representatives from 58 agribusinesses and 9 state governments. The mission will take place in Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi, but will also include engagement with buyers from Burma, Cambodia, and Thailand, offering U.S. businesses a gateway to the broader Southeast Asia region. Vietnam is a promising market, with U.S. exporting $3.1 billion in agricultural products there in 2023. U.S. goods like cotton, dairy, poultry, and fresh fruit are in high demand. The mission aims to strengthen these trade ties and open up new opportunities for U.S. farmers and agribusinesses. Participants will meet with key importers, gain insights into the local markets, and explore opportunities to grow their business in this rapidly developing region. The California Department of Pesticide Regulation is offering $1.9 million in grants for projects focused on sustainable pest management through its 2025 Research and Alliance Grants programs. The grants aim to support innovative pest management practices that are safer for human health, environmentally friendly, and economically viable. The grant programs emphasize projects that help underserved communities reduce the risk of pesticides and promote sustainable practices near schools and urban areas. Applicants can receive between $50,000 and $500,000 for research or up to $400,000 for projects that encourage the adoption of sustainable pest management techniques. The application deadlines are September 19th for research grants and November 21st for alliance grants. More details are available at cdpr.ca.gov. Scholarship applications for the 2024 program from the California Cattlemen's Association will need to be submitted within the next few weeks. Last year, CCA awarded over $49,000 to students studying agriculture. CCA scholarships not only assist students with their current education and future ventures, but help connect them to others involved in the industry. Applications from current undergraduate and postgraduate students will need to be submitted by October 1st. Applicants must have graduated from a California high school or be an out-of-state student currently attending a California college in order to apply. Any CCA young, regular, or feeder members are eligible to apply for the scholarships, and past scholarship recipients are also eligible to reapply. Interviews for the awards will take place during the CCA convention in December. The application and full eligibility requirements are available at calcattleman.org/scholarship. I'm Brian German for AgNet West Radio Network.
The biggest investment in rural electrification since the mid-1930s. That's how President Biden and Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack are describing a newly announced $7 billion investment in rural clean energy projects in 23 states.
To bring the promise of clean energy and lower costs to approximately 5 million rural households, as well as farms and businesses that are located in those 23 states.
Tom Vilsack says designated rural electric co-ops will be using the USDA loans and grants to build new, more resilient power generating systems.
All of this is designed not only to provide more reliant electricity for those rural communities, but will also result in a 43.7 million ton annual reduction of greenhouse gas emissions.
The equivalent of taking 10 million gas-powered cars off the road. Vilsack says these energy projects will also generate about 20,000 jobs. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. If your child is going to school this fall and taking lunch from home, experts say pack that lunch with good nutrition and with food safety in mind. Gary Crawford has more on this edition of Agriculture USA.
It seems like it was just a couple of days since... And now already... It's back to school time, and for many parents and students, it's back to pack a lunch for school time. So what can we do to make sure that lunch we pack for our kids to take to school is packed with decent nutrition, won't make our kids sick? We'll hear from experts on both counts on this edition of Agriculture USA. I'm Gary Crawford. For many, many parents, back to school time is a time of great celebration.
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
My goodness, where did this come from? Ooh.
With the kids back to schooling and mothers carpooling and teachers so dear.
So dear. Oh my.
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
Oh my goodness, that's enough to make you want to cancel school again. But anyway, many parents are preparing so-called brown bag lunches for their kids to take to school, even though most food safety experts do not recommend actually using brown paper bags.
Unless you're using things in your lunch that are totally non-perishable.
You know, apples, peanut butter sandwiches, granola bars, chips, things like that. This from Meredith Carruthers, a food safety expert with the Agriculture Department's Meat and Poultry Hotline. She says even with a frozen gel pack in a brown paper bag, it's not insulated, and so...
The biggest concern is that those foods aren't going to stay cold enough, and therefore bacteria that can cause foodborne illness are going to start multiplying, potentially by the time you go to eat your lunch. And then if you eat your lunch with that bacteria on it that has started to grow, you can potentially get sick. And that's what we don't want.
So try to use a good insulated lunchbox or bag with a frozen cold source. Meredith says with that as a starting point,
you can pretty much take anything for lunch. You just have to make sure you're storing it properly until you're ready to eat it.
Keeping it below 40 degrees. Meredith says that needs to be done even if you're taking leftovers, things like leftover pizza. It's got to be kept cold. So what about, I got an idea. What about taking a chicken leg, something like that, freezing that, using that item as the cold source in the lunchbox? So Meredith, how about that idea? That's your reaction? What's wrong with that?
The big concern is that when that food starts to thaw, those foods will thaw from the outside in. The outer layers of that food, any foodborne illness bacteria that might be present, start to get exposed to that air temperature. And if it's not below 40 degrees, that bacteria can start to multiply. They can multiply to a point of creating toxins that are then heat resistant, won't be killed by reheating, or if your child is eating that frozen food cold, it won't be good and could potentially get them sick.
So keep that in mind. And also, she says we might want to put into that lunchbox or bag some hand sanitizer or hand wipes. So safety, that's one big consideration for that school lunch. The other big one, what foods to pack. Now, years ago, that used to be pretty easy. Maybe maybe a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, chips, an apple, a cookie, that was it. But these days, when we're trying to decide what to pack for our child's lunch, there can be a whole list of things to consider, including cost, of course, and what he or she likes to eat and won't throw out, what's convenient to pack in there and safe to pack. But
maybe number one on that list ought to be nutrition.
Now, Kansas State University Extension food and nutrition expert Sandy Proctor would key in on nutrition, providing the needed calories while also including vitamins, minerals, not too much fat, considering the problems with obesity that many children have. It's a lot trickier job today to pack a good, nutritious lunch.
The truth is, nutrition really matters as we're trying to help them achieve their best in school.
And so here are some things to consider when we parents pack that school lunch.
Make it nutritious. Aim for 1 or 2 servings of a whole grain or some type of complex carbohydrate, 2 to 3 ounces of a lean meat or protein, and 2 servings of a fruit or fruit and vegetable, and then that serving of dairy. And if you can get all of those components in that brown bag lunch, you're really going to add a strong push of nutrition into your child's day.
So we parents have to be creative while also keying in on nutrition, which Sandy Proctor says is more important than most of us think.
It's not fluff. They need it. They're going to do a lot better on tests and all those things that we're testing them on if they have some good, sound nutrition.
Which, Sandy says, is true not only for our kids, but for us too, as school gets going for real this year. No, let's not get carried away here. This has been Agriculture USA. I'm Gary Crawford, heading for the principal's office again and reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
How has drought grown in the Midwest over the month of August, and what does that mean for the region's corn and soybean crops? Rod Bain has the answers.
Drought coverage in the nation's corn and soybean belt? USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says growing areas in the region reported an increase in drought through August.
If we look at the U.S. corn production area in drought, we started the month with just 5% of the corn area in drought. That has increased now to 8%. Still a relatively low number. Soybeans, on the other hand, a little bit more of an increase. They also started the month with 5% of the crop in drought. That increased more than doubled to 12% by the end of August, and that is the greatest amount of U.S. soybeans in drought since the early stages of planting back in late April.
He adds that when comparing other crops and commodities covered in drought across the country, Midwestern corn and beans remain at a pace to have bumper crops this year.
For the most part, the Midwest was immune to the dramatic changes that other areas of the country experienced.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. For the Conservationist of the Year, what goals would you like to see occur this year?
So this is continuing work as the Certified Crop Advisor Conservationist of the Year. They're looking for certified crop advisors who are trying to aid farmers in getting information or conservation practices. One thing we've identified that is keeping farmers from getting conservation practices is actually just information and products. The current federal regulations actually were written in the 1950s. And at that time, those rules were only restricting fertilizers and pesticides. They didn't put into account other developing technologies such as plant biostimulants and some of these newer technologies we're using in agriculture. And so for 2024, our goal is to really help change the laws that are impacting biostimulant regulation to allow them to be used and treated as a fertilizer, not as a pesticide.
So what does that process look like to go through that and get that change to be where it needs to be?
Well, actually, there's a very long on-ramp. We've been working on this since 2014, and the bricks that we've laid on this path are now hopefully being included in the Farm Bill. So more than anything now, it's just supporting the work we've already done, trying to get legislators aware of the problem and hopefully enact those rules. There's an act right now by California regulators. It's called the Plant Biostimulant Act. And so the best thing that farmers can do is call up and say, hey, we support this language. This is going to give us more tools to enact those conservation practices and have more products available to us.
To get to know more about Live Earth Products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com. This is the AgNet News Hour. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Chuck Zimmerman with today's featured interview.
At the Farm Progress Show, I'm visiting with the Clean Fuels Alliance booth, but I have with me some special guests from PepsiCo, and I have two guys here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Adam.
Thank you, Chuck. My name is Adam Buchenbach. I lead the Fleet Engineering Sustainability teams for North America for PepsiCo Foods and PepsiCo Beverages.
And how about you?
Yeah, I'm Dan Christensen with PepsiCo. I'm in my 9th year with the company, Senior Director for Government and External Affairs. So I wear a couple different hats, and the hat I'm here wearing today is getting out and talking with a lot of constituencies in the ag value chain about what we're doing to support farmers.
Well, talking about that, since we are at Farm Progress Show, what brought you here along with the Clean Fuels folks?
Yeah, I mean, it's the largest outdoor trade show for ag in the world, and so this was a venue that we've been thinking about for quite some time to get in front of farmers and talk about what we're doing. And the partnership with Clean Fuels made a ton of sense because we're new members, and so we got together with them and said, hey, are you thinking about going there? We'd love to go in on a lot with you. And so it was a great chance for us to come here, talk about the biodiesel work that we're doing in our fleet, also talk about a lot of the on-farm sustainability work that we're doing in partnership with our other value chain partners.
Well, I did want to talk about that with your fleet is, what drew you to that? What's the extent of it, and what does it mean for PepsiCo?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me start back in 2021. We launched PepsiCo Positive, which is really our strategic transformation of what we think is going to help create value and growth in the future. And it follows 3 pillars: positive agriculture, positive value chain, and positive choices in our products. So our fleet really falls under that positive value chain piece, and we've got some pretty aggressive carbon reduction goals. So as we look towards our net zero target by 2040 of reducing the emissions associated with our operations, specifically our private fleet, we've looked at a suite of solutions. So we've done a lot with electrification in the field. We run one of the largest over-the-road natural gas fleets, which is primarily powered by renewable natural gas. And we were looking for other solutions to make meaningful impact as we go on this journey. And so we came upon both renewable diesel and biodiesel as solutions that we could incorporate into our fleet of diesel tractors today and start making progress towards those goals.
Now, in your fleet, I don't know how many vehicles you have, but is this across the board, or are you just still working into it?
That's a great question. So we have one of the largest private fleets here in North America, a little over 80,000 total assets. For us, we've really targeted biofuels and renewable and alternative fuels in our over-the-road business. So some of the equipment that uses the most fuel in our operations has the largest emissions impact. One thing we've tried to focus in on is progress over perfection, and being able to switch over those trucks today to run on a biogenic fuel helps us start to make that meaningful progress. When we look at some of our more last mile direct store delivery type operations, electrification for us fits really well, so we are spending a lot of time with that solution there. But it's these long distance over the road routes that are hard to electrify, hard to decarbonize, where we might go from Kansas to the Canadian border, down to the Mexican border and back. These are really difficult places where there's not a lot of infrastructure, very challenging duty cycles, and this is where we've been able to incorporate biofuels and really start to make meaningful progress towards those goals.
We have a lot of soybean growers here, so when they come by, what kind of questions are they asking? They probably are wondering just exactly what you guys are doing, right?
Yeah, well, it's great. I mean, part of the draw is we have a lot of hydration here for them and snacks, so it helps draw the people in. And then we've got this beautiful biodiesel truck here, which just catches people's eye, draws in, and then they immediately have questions and want to know about it. So today, especially, we've seen a lot of traffic coming in, people asking a lot of, very detailed, good questions about how the truck works, and then that gives us an opportunity to talk about, where this fits into our strategy, how it supports farmers, because a lot of the fuel stock comes from soybean oil, corn oil, so it's been great today. Yeah.
Yeah, I would not doubt that there are farmers that maybe aren't using biodiesel themselves. Maybe this gives them some ideas.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we talked to a few folks today who, they wanted to go back 20 years, and their experience with biodiesel initially was not good. And so they've not used it since. And, Adam, and we have one of our drivers here too, Brian, have just been great about talking about how the quality of the fuel has increased. And, you talk to a driver like Brian who does 600 miles a day on a truck like the one we have here. I mean, that's a pretty good proof point for folks to know that this is a solution that can work.
Well, where do you go from here?
So where do we go from here? We're continuing to incorporate low-carbon solutions across our fleet. Today we have about 100 trucks here in the U.S. operating on B99 up to B100. We've upfit a couple hundred additional trucks beyond that with a solution from Optimus Technologies, which allows us to run on up to B100. So we're continuing to grow the number of diesel tractors that we have in our fleet that are equipped with this system. And as we continue to deploy fuel at our locations for B99 and B100, we can continue to convert more of those traditional petroleum gallons over. We're also looking for opportunities to bring this to retail. So not only can our fleet benefit from it, but a lot of our third parties we rely on to move goods throughout our supply chain can also take advantage of some of those same benefits.
Well, before we close, anything else either one of you might want to say we didn't touch on?
Well, I can just say, a big thank you to everybody that's come by the booth today, and for the Farm Progress team for being so great about welcoming us in. I don't know if it's true, but I've heard from multiple people come up to me and say, we don't think we've ever seen a food and beverage company show up at Farm Progress before. We had Governor Reynolds here yesterday, stopped by the booth. We talked with her for about 10-15 minutes, said the same thing, and just said, we need more folks on that end of the value chain showing up at places like this. We need to make the connection. So as much as anything else, we're really here to say we're a part of that value chain. We support what we call the first mile of that value chain, our farmers, and really want to make sure people understand everything we're doing.
Well, thank you guys very much, Adam and Dan. We are here at the Farm Progress Show. I'm Chuck Zimmerman reporting.
Sustainability is a buzzword in agriculture. Chad Smith has more on how it applies to farmland.
It's well known that sustainability is a buzzword in agriculture. Howard Halderman, president of the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers, talks about how sustainability also applies to farmland.
To me, sustainability is the preservation of a farm for future generations. And really, sustainability is two different things. One is growing or enhancing the productivity of the farm over time. So you might be improving its fertility, or you might be improving its organic matter. So a lot of soil improvements. But in addition, it means that that farm is financially viable long term. And that means success both for the landowner as well as the farmer. Sometimes those are one and the same people.
Programs are available to support landowners in improving their sustainability practices.
So the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, offers a variety of sustainability or conservation programs through the Natural Resource Conservation Service. There are offices in most counties around the country that you can access those programs. Sometimes that's Conservation Reserve Program, where it's a CRP, buffer strips, waterways, a whole host of options exist there. In addition, there are also some carbon credit programs that various companies are offering. And so a farmer or a landowner can be paid for sequestering carbon, where we're holding that carbon in the soil, and you can be compensated for that. And then finally, there are programs where if you grow a crop sustainably, sometimes you can earn a premium for that crop that's being grown under sustainable practices.
Halderman talks about where to begin.
I really think that a landowner just needs to investigate what sustainability means for the soils and the farm operations that exist in their area, and then look at how they can start to ease into it. This is not a wholesale change overnight. And so starting to make little tweaks and changes into your production practices is the way to start.
Again, that's Howard Halderman with the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. Chad Smith reporting.
Seed bank resources and germplasm collections, such as found at USDA research labs, play a significant part in assuring plant species survival, as well as future crop diversity. Rod Bain explains.
The importance of germplasm collections in agriculture is not lost on Rebecca Pavlis, the geneticist and curator at USDA's Vegetable Germplasm Collection in Geneva, New York.
What if some big catastrophe happens and we need to start fresh with our agricultural systems? Heaven forbid. These collections of seeds, they are a seed bank, and so they're basically a plant library. We're in charge of making sure that these plant varieties are maintained and healthy and available for use.
As she points out, the purpose of these collections go beyond disaster recovery efforts.
This vegetable collections actually represent genetic diversity collections. We try to capture as much of the genetic diversity of these vegetable crops as possible and hold them here, because this is really a great resource for plant breeders to use, to look for new things like new genes involved in disease resistance for current or new diseases that might be plaguing some crops. Also, new traits to develop new varieties to bring to market. So things like color and flavor, for example, are really important for a lot of our vegetables.
There are efforts to create genetic diversity among produce varieties. In the case of Pavlis and the ARS facilities in Upper New York State,
we hold over 6,000 different types of tomatoes here. It's not just the kind of tomatoes you'd find in a grocery store. In fact, most of the tomatoes that we have, or for the other crops, these are not necessarily the improved kind of things that you can find in the grocery store. These are going to be the oddballs that have a lot of really interesting traits that maybe just haven't been really taken advantage of yet.
She reiterates the need to hold a diverse array of plant germplasms, both within crop varieties and all plants.
In some cases, we don't necessarily know what we have here, and we don't know what we're going to need in the future. But by holding on to this genetic diversity, we have it available to meet any challenges that our vegetable crops face in the future.
This goes beyond maintaining the health of a germplasm collection,
but to actually distribute it so it gets used. Just for a sense of scale, in the last year, we filled well over 400 different material requests. And this is actually a resource for around the world as well. We actually distribute a lot lot of material internationally too. And so that's really important to make it clear that these collections that we're holding is really a resource for the whole world.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
That's today's top agriculture news. I'm Sabrina Halverson. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find our broadcast team of Brian German and Sabrina Halverson on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.